So I will begin. I'm Bill Adams. I'm the managing director of the section of legal education and admissions to the bar with the American Bar Association. I began in this position on April 6th, which was not a very opportune time to assume this position, but it is what it is. So let me sort of fill you in on news from your accreditor at this point in time. As most of you are probably aware, we asked all the schools to report to us what they did in the spring. The Department of Education gave accreditors the ability to exceed our distance education guidelines in the spring and in the summer. So we permitted schools to do that, but we asked them to report to us what they did. And the reports we got indicated that 186 schools told us they converted to online, as online is defined in our distance education guidelines, or standard, I should say. We believe for the other 14 schools, they also went online, but if you do less than 1/3 of your course in distance education, it doesn't count as a distance education course. So we believe all 200 did it, but all but 14 had to exceed the 1/3 of their course materials. 92 schools reported to us that they modified their experiential learning requirements. We asked the schools to tell us how they were verifying their student identity. The top 5 ways that schools reported to us was 1, visual confirmation of students, 2, code calling on students. That reminds me of scary days back in law school. 3, lesson plans that included group work and classroom interaction. The 4th way was schools asked for 2-step authentication logins, and the 5th most cited way to verify student identity was the use of digital metrics, which I'm sure you all know now with distance education platforms allow you to measure how often students entered, how long they stayed in, those kinds of things. 169 of the schools indicated to us that they were going online in the summer. The rest said they were not. Maybe after the report was submitted, they did as well, but that was the report we got. You're also probably aware that we asked schools to file for emergency variance applications for next year because we knew that probably most, if not all of you, would need to continue to exceed our distance education guidelines. And the Department of Education told accreditors that we needed to follow our rules in doing what we did in permitting schools to go online. So according to our rules, we were going to have to do these emergency variances. We tried to make them as simple as possible so that schools could quickly fill them out. And so the deadline for submission was June 29th, I believe, and the council just met yesterday. Letters approving these are being prepared and going out as I speak. I've already gotten a few thank yous from schools, so in the next few days you should be receiving your letters for approval. In those 2021 plans, we saw that 166 schools asked for permission to go online all year. 34 elected to only ask for the fall. They will, of course, be permitted to also apply for the spring should they want to do so, but 166 schools have indicated that they think they probably will have to exceed our distance education guidelines next year. Of the schools that gave us their fall plans, 52 had indicated they plan to start fully online. 61 indicated they wanted to do some sort of hybrid program, and those hybrid programs vary in a lot of ways as to some students participating in face-to-face and some students participating online, and there were a wide variety of those. 87 schools indicated in their plans that they hope to start in person We think that's probably overly optimistic, so we expect that some of those schools will need to go online. And what we said in those requests for plans was to please give us a contingency plan. So even if you thought you're starting hybrid or online, I mean in person, that you have a contingency plan in there that the council could approve, so that if you do need to change your mode of instruction, that you can do so and simply notify us. So in other words, if your school submitted a plan saying we're starting hybrid, here's our contingency plan if we have to go online. Or if you submitted if the school submitted a plan saying we plan to start face-to-face, but we have this plan should we need to go online, where the next step, we're going to have a notice form that you can fill out and simply tell us we're going with our contingency plan, we have to make that change. If you didn't have a contingency plan, we would ask the school to just simply submit a new application to tell us what you want to do. We're going to try to make this as easy as possible for you while adhering to Department of Education requirements. We also understand that probably at the November council meeting, certainly no later than the February council meeting, the council will need to discuss what happens if this pandemic goes beyond this academic year. And once again, you have to do this in 21-22. So depending upon what the developments of the pandemic are, we'll give you more information either after the November or February meeting, telling you if the plans for submitting a request to go online in the subsequent year. Obviously, we're all learning more about distance education, maybe more than you wanted to learn, but I think that behooves us then to engage with you and talk to you about your experiences and have the council consider whether it wants to further loosen the distance education guidelines going forward. I think schools are learning the positives and the negatives of online education, and I'm really interested in finding out how schools have experienced this, how your students have experienced this, and want to have the council discuss whether additional flexibility for distance education moving forward past the pandemic is in order. I mean, certainly part of the reason we had a more difficult time in giving you more permission than other accreditors is other accreditors, for the most part, don't have limits on the amount of distance education. They simply have restrictions on how you do it. Because we had limits on the amount, it made it more burdensome for you and for us to approve you doing this. That's one of the reasons I think we'll need to discuss this moving forward. I also want to talk about briefly that we're going to start having roundtables more often to talk to people interested in legal education and about how we can make our standards better so that they continue to protect students and applicants, but also make more sense for schools and try to reduce the burdens where it can be done without abandoning our requirements to protect students and applicants. I will say that what I've seen both on our listservs, the dean's listservs, the associate dean's listservs, and from the materials that schools submitted to us in their reports and in their plans, that I'm really pleased that schools have been really creative under the most pressing and difficult circumstances, and that they have come forward and also cooperated with each other. I know schools, not just law schools, schools in general have to compete for students, et cetera. But in this crisis, I've really admired how schools have been willing to provide information to each other, to help each other. And it makes me proud to be a part of legal education. And so with that, that's all I have to say. I'll be glad to answer questions at the end of this. Thanks you all for inviting me to do this.
Thank you so much, Bill. Judy, updates from the AALS.
Absolutely. So when I was last gathered with Kelly, it was only Friday. We were busy talking about the ICE directive that had upended most of higher education. And I told you then that LSAC and AALS joined the amicus brief that was part of the Harvard MIT case, and extraordinary. The government completely gave in and took back their directive. So this was wonderful news, although it was a very long, difficult 10 days. So that's the most important update. My name is Judy Reed. I'm Executive Director of the Association of American Law Schools. Most of my career has been at Georgetown. I've been on the faculty there. I was on the faculty there for 45 years. I'm now emeritus, and served as dean for 15 of those years. AALS itself is 120 years old this year. We have 176 member schools, 17 service fee paid schools. We're governed by an executive committee of 9, all of whom are faculty or deans, in contrast to the larger governing body that Bill has at the ABA. Our staff is small, it's only 26. So to do all the things we try to do each year, we rely heavily on volunteers. And I hope you will join them if you have not already been part of one of our planning committees or found a way into section leadership. Our mission is to support you and your law schools in improving the quality of teaching and research and administration that you do. Our traditional programs include now several for deans. We do an annual deans forum at the annual meeting, day long, just for deans. We also have a smaller dean steering committee of 15 deans who are nominated by other deans from around the country to keep their eye on issues that need attention during the year. We do a lot with communications. If you haven't looked at our website, aals.org, take a look. One of the things you'll find is that we weekly update both news clips and blogs of interest to legal educators, and it is sent to all the law school deans. We try to be a megaphone for your school and for the announcements you would make. National reporters, alas, do not follow all 200 law schools, but they all now follow AALS. So we retweet and repost your announcements and achievements and new programs. So to be sure and send things to us when you want them to go out to a national audience. We have a membership review process. Unlike ABA, we are not an accreditor, although we do have at least one AALS representative on each accreditation team that visits. Our process focuses on what we call core values at AALS. So that's scholarship, teaching, shared governance, and diversity. We rely now much more on peer review and less on having report backs. Our goal is to make the review both more useful to you and less of a burden. For faculty, I hope you know, we are your learned society. We continue to invest in the 103 sections we have organized by fields of interest so that they can become an important network for you in your field or fields of scholarship and teaching. Let me talk about a few of the new things we've undertaken since COVID-19 began. We do a Dean's Dialogue, as I mentioned at the beginning, every Friday, although for the summer we've the luxury of going every other week. Kelly Testy and I typically welcome between 140 and 150 deans to talk about topics of interest. Bill Adams has been a stalwart, and at every session, so we get an update from the ABA and then from either NALP or NCBE. We have at least 3 deans who talk about the theme for the week. And recently we've had both presidents and provosts who formerly were law school deans talking to us about these issues from the university's perspective. We've been adding new pages on the website. There's one on how COVID issues are affecting legal education. And another, if you haven't seen, I highly recommend. It's an anti-racist clearinghouse put together, and I want to thank the 5 deans responsible for it. Angela Onwachi-Willig, Danielle Conway, Danielle Holly-Walker, Kim Mutcherson, and Carla Pratt. They've done an extraordinary job, And there's readings, there's music, there's art, and there's a very important checklist of things to look at your own law school. Faculty hiring. We've always supported in 4 different ways, but this year has made a change. First and recent, we have a section on the website on becoming a law teacher. Thanks to Sean Scott, who was our associate director last year, there's lots of information. So if someone you know is interested in coming into the academy, be sure they've taken a look at that section of the website. It will give really helpful suggestions. There's actually videos of a mock paper presentation and of a appointments committee discussing a particular candidate. Second, every year we put together a placement bulletin. It's open now. Every member in fee-paid law school for free can post any open positions they have. Third, we do the FAR, the Faculty Appointments Register. In that process, candidates can upload their resumes, and often they'll put up a recent paper as well. And school appointments committees can review them and decide which candidates they are interested in calling back for an interview. Most years, the fourth part would be a faculty recruitment conference in October, but because of the virus, the in-person meeting is canceled. So this year, once the schools receive that FAR distribution of all the candidates, each of you will be free to go through them and make your own arrangements, presumably virtually, to meet the candidates that most fit your faculty. I can tell you, and I'm pleased to report, that already more than 100 law schools are participating in the FAR. So for those candidates who worry there is no job market this year, no, it turns out there really is. Next, we've been working with sections to put on more webinars this summer, and a number have come through with wonderful programs, particularly the section on law and technology, the leadership section, the clinical section. So take a look at the sections that interest you, your teaching, your research, and you may find they're putting on a special webinar series this summer. For early career, junior faculty, AALS has been putting on Faculty Focus, Tuesday afternoons, 4 p.m. Eastern. If you go to our website, you can see the 4 sessions that have already taken place recorded. It's probably a very good resource to share with your early career colleagues. They're the ones often feeling the most vulnerable. They don't have tenure. They're of an age where they may have young children. We're all feeling the stress of this moment, but it's hardest on them. So it's a good opportunity. Finally, a word about research. In 2018, when we were all so worried about the inexplicable drop in applicants to law school, not to medical school, not to graduate school, not to business school, it was just law school. So we did this study with Gallup. We'd hoped to have 3,000 undergraduates return responses. In the end, 22,000 did. So it's a very good source of what undergraduates think about graduate and professional school in general and law school in particular. You can find links to the report on our website. We learned, for some of us, surprising things. 55% of the first-year law students who were surveyed as well as undergraduates, 55% first decided on going to law school before high school. I used to think people went to college, got interested in a particular field. No, it turns out many decide long before college and indeed pick their college with law school in mind. 1/3 of those first-year students decide before high school. So that has real implications as you think about effective outreach to building a pipeline of future law students at your law school. In 2019, we began our second major project. It's called the American Law School Dean. And I want to thank both Kelly and LSAC and David Payne and ETS, because they are 2 of the sponsors that make this research possible. We're going to look at and try to understand what are the paths to leadership in legal education. We want to better understand the search process itself. Was there a search consultant? Do you have a contract? How long is that contract? With whom did you negotiate your contract? And we want information from current deans, sitting deans. What are the biggest challenges on your plate? The goal is to level the playing field to a much more diverse pool of candidates to be future deans in the academy. So thank you to our wonderful conference sponsors and to you, Elizabeth, for including me, having this opportunity to talk a little about the ALS, and I look forward to your questions.
Judy, thank you so much. It was a pleasure as always. All right, next we have David Payne, who's with ETS, which oversees the GRE. David, take it away.
Great, thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you for having me and including me in this session. I'm going to see if the technology will work here. I'm going to try to share my screen, and hopefully people can see that. And what I'd like to do over the next several minutes is to just provide you with some information about ETS and GRE, and realizing that I'm the relative newcomer to the group. Here's what I'd like to share with you today. A little bit of information about ETS as an organization. Many people have heard of ETS, but my experience is not a lot of people really know about ETS. I'll spend just a little bit of time talking about the GRE General Test, spend some time talking about our global footprint, talk about one of our recent innovations, which is making the GRE General Test available through remote proctoring technology available to candidates at home around the world. I'll also spend just a moment or two going over what we have been doing to support law schools in terms of their efforts to provide validity evidence for the appropriate use of the GRE in law school admissions. And then finally, just mention a couple of things in terms of the tools that we provide both to applicants to your programs and also to your programs. So with that, let me just get through it. In terms of ETS, we are a not-for-profit, although we're based in Princeton, New Jersey. We are a 501c3. We've been around for about 70 years. Our mission, and we take our social mission very seriously, is to help advance quality and equity in education globally. And the way in which we do that primarily are through two means. One, we deliver products and services to support the educational and employment communities. And second, and perhaps less well known, we also do a significant amount of research, basic fundamental research. And so we're recognized as one of the leading experts in the world on validity research. But we also do research to help advance progress on educational challenges. For example, we're currently investing resources in trying to raise literacy levels in the US. And so we have a very large R&D capability. And overall, we currently are the world's largest private educational assessment and research organization. So let me focus now on the GRE General Test. And many people have heard, obviously, of the General Test, but I'd like to spend a few minutes just going over the structure of the test, what the test measures, and what we report to law schools. So the General Test measures constructs in three areas that have been shown to be important for success in graduate and professional education. These are verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, and analytical writing. And as you're taking a look at this slide, I'd simply ask, as you reflect on what's necessary to succeed in legal education, I think many of us would agree these are the types of constructs that are important foundational skills in order to succeed in legal education. In terms of the scores that are reported to law schools, we report scores on all three measures. The verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning are reported on a 130 to 170 scale. And then the analytical writing is reported the scores on a 0 to 6 scale. And we also make available the essays. And so if your faculty or admissions committees are interested in seeing those essays, we also make those available. So that's what the General Test provides. A little bit about our global footprint. We currently have over 1,000 test centers located around the world in more than 160 countries. The GRE General Test is currently used by literally thousands of graduate programs, business programs, and law schools over the past 4 years have increasingly also been taking advantage of the opportunity to access this population of test takers. There are currently more than 65 law schools that are accepting GRE for admissions purposes, and our folks over in R&D have provided research guidance to more than 100 law schools who are interested in addressing the very important question of validity of the GRE for predicting success in legal education. In terms of the size of the population of people who take the GRE General Test around the globe, the most recent complete testing year data we have were for 2019, and there were over 700,000 people, GRE General Tests were administered around the globe. Now, one of the things that we did, and it's relevant to this session on the COVID environment, is very early on when countries started to close down, China being one of the first countries, obviously, that started to close down, we recognized that it was important for candidates and for schools that rely on GRE scores to have access to the test for people who could not get into testing centers, either because it was closed down or because of their own personal situations. So what we did was we worked with ProctorU and made the test available through remote proctoring. I'm very proud of the fact that in 6 weeks, we went from not having a test available to having it available in almost every country around the globe. We also thought it was important to have the same version of the test that candidates would take in the testing center available to people who took the test at home. That way, candidates who had been preparing for the test already knew what the test experience was going to be like. And other than the difference between testing at home versus testing in a dedicated testing center, everything else was the same, and the scores for the test were reported. And we've been very pleased with the progress that we've made on this. Across our programs at ETS, we've now registered over 250,000 people to take ETS tests through remote proctoring. We are also going to be continuing this going forward. We had plans to end it in the fall, but it looks as though with the hotspots that are flaring up in the US and in other places, it's likely that either test centers won't be available or candidates may not feel comfortable for various reasons going to a testing center. And so we are going to continue to have the remote proctored test available around the globe. The other area that I just mentioned was the work that we've been doing in terms of supporting law schools with providing validity evidence. And we've really taken 3 approaches in this regard. First, we have worked with a number of law schools directly to do a validity study using data from the law schools. So we've done that for a number of law schools. But we also recognize that for a lot of law schools, that would be a challenge, either from a resource perspective or in terms of the number of applicants that they would have to contribute data to the validity study. So we put together a national validity study, and basically what we attempted to do here was to sample different types of law school based on size, selectivity, public versus private, and so forth. And what we did was take data from multiple law schools and then ask the question, does the GRE predict success in legal education for these law schools? And those data are available on our website. The last thing that we are also doing, my colleague David Klieger in our research and development area is also available if law schools have specific questions about their specific situation. And so we are experts in validity. We are not experts in legal education. And so we'll leave that to the ABA and to the law schools. But on the technical side, we're happy to try to support you as best as we can as you grapple with trying to provide validity evidence. And then I'd also like to mention that we recognize, especially in this time where competition for top quality students in all programs has really ramped up, we've tried to provide resources to make it available for law schools and professional schools and graduate schools to try to proactively recruit into their programs students who would be appropriate for their programs. And we really offer 2 services here. One is the GRE search service that allows you to recruit students who meet various criteria that you may have. So if you're interested in students who indicate that they're interested in specific areas, or that are coming from specific undergraduate majors, or who have specific test scores or grade point averages, we have about 30 different criteria you can use to identify a population that you would want to proactively encourage to apply to your program. So it's a very cost-effective way to identify potential candidates to bring into your program. But a couple of years ago, we got feedback from a number of programs that while they really liked the search service, they acknowledged that they didn't have the capabilities on their program or at their institution to do really high quality digital marketing campaigns. And students are really savvy consumers of digital information. And simply sending an email to a student is not likely to produce the results that you'd like to see. So we partnered with Liaison International, and they have a digital marketing group, and we offer a product called Higher Yield, which when paired with the search service allows you to identify the students you'd like to proactively recruit. And then we have several different tiers of customized marketing that you can do. And we also will work with you in terms of analyzing the yield that you're getting out of that would be appropriate for your individual institution. And then finally, I wanted to mention that on our website, we try to be as transparent as possible. And so this slide outlines a number of areas where we're providing information that we believe will be relevant to law schools. So we've got information on law school resources and validity information. For those faculty and staff who are not that familiar with the GRE test and how to use the GRE scores, we have information on that. We also have up-to-date information on what we're doing in this COVID era, and that has to do with what we're making available through our testing centers, and also information and Q&As on the test at home option that we've got. And then finally, one of the initiatives that we launched several years ago was to try to be a source of information for schools that tried to embrace holistic admissions. And what we did here was we scoured the research literature and also worked with graduate and professional programs to identify what we refer to as promising practices. So practices that will allow you to use all the admissions information you have about candidates to try to meet your specific mission needs and what you're trying to accomplish in your admissions processes. And we continue to curate information there. So if you have questions about holistic admissions, or if you have developed practices that you think are actually very helpful, we'd be happy to try to promote those on our website. So again, Elizabeth, we really thank you for including us in this session, and I look forward to the question and answers at the end of the session.
Great, thank you so much, David. We really appreciate it. All right, so last but certainly not least is the fabulous Kelly Testy, who heads up LSAC, who will be telling us updates about the LSAT exam. Kelly?
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And I want to say it's so good to be with all of you today. I know Judy and Bill and I get to see each other a lot. And Elizabeth, it's great to be able to have the chance to address all the attendees at your conference. And thank you for putting it on. It's just awesome to have a chance for everyone to talk with each other and collaborate within legal education. So I want to begin with just a huge thanks to everyone who's out there trying to figure out all these logistics. You know, I know so many of you. I even got a great note from one of my former students from my contracts days teaching. And so I know many of you, but many of you I think know that I was a professor for a long time at Seattle University and then their dean for about 5 years. And then I was dean at the University of Washington School of Law for 8 years before joining LSAC. And it's all of you who are out there in the trenches doing that work of the career services, of course, the admission too, usually the group I talked to more recently, and also in every area of student services and access. And it's just amazing the work you're doing. And I know you've had to have many starts and stops while you've done this planning where we thought, okay, we can open, maybe not, back and forth and all around. And we've certainly been through that at LSAC as we've very quickly moved the LSAT to a remote proctored option that's working extraordinarily well. And in fact, the good news is thanks to that, because 99% of all people who enroll in law school have an LSAT score, our volumes for this year, even though they were lagging, have now come to exceed the volume of applicants for even last year, which was the highest so far. So we're just delighted to be able to offer the LSAT Flex and to bring those candidates to you. And I know you'll take good care of them because I see how well you're doing everything you're doing here. And that is something that I just wanna thank you so much for and let you know that I and LSAC continue to be available to you to help you with that work in any way. I usually talk to deans and admission deans, and I noticed that in your groupings, that's not a group that you have as many representatives from. So let me just say a little bit of a word about what we do and how we were formed. So LSAC has been in existence for over 70 years now. And ironically, when we first began, we were actually at ETS, although at that time it wasn't seen as appropriate to give law students a test that was not designed for law. And so LSAC was born out of that history, and since that time has had an incredible influence in terms of making sure that the exact skills that legal education needs are the same ones that the LSAT tests. And that's why all research shows that the very best admission process today is one, as David said, that's holistic, but that has the LSAT as one factor in that process. And the LSAT continues to be the single best predictor of law school success. However, LSAT and GPA combined are even stronger. And then, as you can imagine, if you're doing the holistic work, which we think is so important, that becomes even stronger to make sure that you're getting those students off on the right foot, you're opening the doors wide, because access and equity are so very vital. In fact, the reason LSAC was started to begin with is because at that time, law school admissions were really constrained to particularly white males who went to particular law schools, had particular recommenders. And at the time of our growth, particularly African-American candidates, women, Jewish candidates were not being admitted to law school. And so it was very critical to open up the doors of legal education widely. And I think one of the things that you'll all be happy to know is that we together have in fact made good progress. All of the law schools are members of LSAC. You're formed by deans for legal education. We're a small nonprofit that works only in legal education. But we've actually made some good progress on equity. And what I want to make sure we see by that is it's not that we don't have a lot farther to go, gosh, we do, to mirror society. But right now, legal education is admitting most every racial subgroup at percentages or exceeding percentages of college graduation. And so that means that together we have made progress, but it means the pipeline is still the single biggest issue that is the barrier that we must work on together. And what that means is we need to look at college graduation rates. And you all know that when we look there, we're going to need to look at high school graduation rates and right back all the way through pre-law. And honestly, I think even mother's health. And so that issue of equity in our world is so strong. And it's our origination story. And it's why we do the work we do to promote access and equity in legal education. I want to mention to you, because I know you're at the end of a long day here, that at lsac.org, you can find up-to-date information, real-time volume on applications and applicants. You can also see there the enormous wide variety of pipeline building activities that we engage in. We work with the entire pre-law community, and we also, right now, we have what we call PLUS, pre-law undergraduate scholar programs that are at work in all the schools. And then we're doing nationally online webinars for those students who couldn't participate in those school programs. And that's a good example where there's a little silver lining to having to go online, because that's pushed us to actually expand that work. You also see there what the candidates see, because when the candidates apply to law school, they come to us. And our job, and what we take so seriously, is to make that easy, to open our doors widely and help them on that successful enrollment journey. And so we help your admissions offices by providing all the technology that they use to do their work, and also by providing candidates an easy way to apply. For decades, we've done a lot of marketing and outreach. Your admissions offices have access to what's called a candidate referral service that has all the prospects, both in law and many other places from digital marketing that helps your schools reach out to them. And I know that, you know, there's so much that so many of you that don't work in admissions probably are thinking, well, they can do that. And I understand that. Before I walked into LSAC 3 years ago, I honestly didn't know all that we did. And I knew that my admission dean made it work. And now I see how that happens, because I think many schools have told me that if we didn't do what we did, they'd need another 5 or 6 people to do that. So it's a pleasure to work with everyone. And I want to leave you just with a quick couple of lessons learned that I've learned as I've walked through this time of COVID and this, I hope, permanent reawakening to the need for more race equity in our world, that I hope might be helpful to all of you as you go forward. And I want to begin with the fact that I think in a time like this, don't be afraid to take some risks. When I had to move the LSAT online to what we call LSAT Flex, it was scary. We had to do it fast. But I think committing and then executing well is so critical. Because, for example, right now, all of our graduates are really struggling because the states haven't decided what they're doing with the bar exam. And they, you know, there could have been solutions that helped everyone know. And so I just want to encourage you as you make decisions, sometimes knowing and having a plan is worth it to just then be able to give people that certainty and move forward. And that's something that I certainly saw in doing LSAT Flex. The other part of that I think is equally important is in a time like this, it's easy to say, well, let's just take what we did and do the same thing and do it in a different way. But I think real resilience and growth is when you use this opportunity to take another step that you knew you wanted to take anyway, and you can now move it maybe forward quicker. As an example, we knew we wanted to make the LSAT a little shorter, because if we can have the same strong predictive impact and have that test experience be even a little shorter, it makes the candidate's journey even better. And so we use this as an opportunity to move that forward, but still maintaining the same questions, the same categories, the same score scale, et cetera. So we had the best of both worlds in innovation and stability. And so I encourage you to try that as well in all the realms you have to make decisions in. The second thing I want to encourage is put students first. I have long had a little sign on my desk that says, please tell me exactly how this benefits our students. And I urge you, keep them centered, because as much as we're all struggling in a world that we're in, they sure are. And we're there to help them on their journey. And I think keeping that there is important. Third, let's double down on diversity, equity, and inclusion, accessibility in all ways. And one example of that is when we do the LSAT now, we actually provide computers for anyone who doesn't have one, or provide a place to get an internet connection. We've got to think in that way when we make this change. And that's made all the difference. I got 2 emails yesterday that actually gave me those goosebump kind of feelings, where an African-American woman, for instance, that was so eager to test but didn't have access to her computer because it was somewhere else and she was stuck elsewhere, got her score and wrote to me personally to say, wow, I got a 176. And she said, I just heard, I'm hearing from schools I didn't know existed. And it's just awesome. So double down on equity right now, and in everything you do, I think that will help keep legal education strong. Fourth thing quickly is think virtual, but make it great. In other words, don't just take something we used to do and try and cram it into a new format. You can make it even better. There's so much ingenuity and creativity in legal ed. I see it in all of you. And so I think this is a time when we can actually make legal education stronger. And that's what I'm excited about seeing. And then finally, let's just remember that this journey that our students are on is one journey. From pre-law and into enrollment, where LSAC takes so much work, into legal education, where the ABA and Bill and Judy do so much important work, and then on into practice and licensure, where NCB has a key role, where NALP has a key role. We have to all work in that strong ecosystem to make legal education strong. And if there's ever been a time in our world when we know that matters, it's now, because everybody's out there in the world having a hard time breathing for one reason or another. And if we don't have law strong, our world's not going to be strong. And if we don't have strong lawyers, we don't have law being strong. And if we don't have strong legal education, the lawyers aren't strong. So together, let's stick together and we can all move this forward. So thank you, Elizabeth. Great to be with you today.
Great, thank Kelly. Wow, wonderful inspirational words. Appreciate it very much. All right, so I think we have a comment and a question for Bill, I believe. So first, Bill, there was a mention that somebody thought the roundtables were a fantastic idea and they'd really like that type of interaction. And then the question is, will there be changes in dates for schools that have site visits scheduled for 2020, 2021?
So under Department of Education guidance, accreditors are allowed to do virtual visits this year. So we plan to do the same visits, but through a virtual process. Before the session this afternoon, I was working on, I don't know whether it's the 15th draft of how we'll do the virtual visits, but I think we've pretty much hammered out almost all of the details. And I hope in the next day or two, we'll be sending to the schools and team chairs how we plan to do virtual visits. Now, I'm telling schools in the fall that they can ask to delay their visit to the spring if they want, and it will be up to the schools if they want to, but we really encourage everyone else to keep their dates. They can ask us for a postponement, but I prefer they not. I want to say that I think this has forced us to rethink our site visit process as a whole. And I think some of the changes we want to do with the virtual visit, we'll try to implement post this year. The main change that I'm really pushing is that the staff will be more involved at an earlier stage to help both the school and the teams know what it is we think the council wants. So we'll look at your SEQ, the staff will go through each question and we'll say, we think all the facts are there, the team doesn't need to follow up on anything. Or we'll say, we think these facts are missing that the council will want to know. So hopefully, I mean, we can't make a compliance determination and we want to be clear about that, but hopefully the visit will be more focused and that both the team and the schools will really know exactly what we think the council needs. And by doing that, I think also the staff can fix some of your technical problems. There are some of our standards where it's really a bright line rule and we can tell you, you need to change this disclaimer or you need to do this. And we can fix some of the things that currently schools have report backs on. So I'm hoping that it will make the process easier and more understandable for both the schools and the teams, reduce the number of report backs. Moving forward, I would hope maybe we can even talk about whether we can reduce the size of teams moving forward to make the visits less expensive. I will say about the virtual visits, the department says that with a virtual visit process, there has to be a follow-up visit. So we will make sure that follow-up visit occurs whenever travel can once again be safe, who knows. But because it's required, it'll be a small, maybe 1 or 2 people, and probably we'll ask them to do the class visits and also to follow up if there were any issues from the virtual visit that the council wants further information on. We'll just give that 1 or 2 people the direction. This is what the council needs the school to provide. So hopefully it will be a better process. I mean, one of the things that the pandemic has caused us to do is to rethink a lot of things. And so I hope that this will be a better process moving forward. And also, particularly with schools in the fall and early spring, I'm going to offer our help. Since you're doing things virtually anyway, if you want to ask one of us to sit in on some of the early team meetings virtually to sort of help you figure out how to do this, I'm offering our assistance to do that. So hopefully we can help you get through this in a better way. Thanks for the question, though.
Well, and thank you for your thoughtfulness in reviewing that process and trying to help schools through it this year. I'm sure it's very much appreciated. So our next question was, if we're scheduled to have our visit last spring, will we need to resubmit our SEQ, self-assessment, etc., or just an update?
An update. We don't want to force people to redo their SEQs. As long as you're doing the current one, we'll just ask for updates.
Okay, great, thank you. And unless anybody else types in a question, then there was a comment that was added to supplement Judy's presentation, which was a link to the ALS section on technology law and legal education summer webinar series. So I know that they've been having great webinars, and so if you're interested in that series and what they're offering, the link is available in the comments. So seeing no additional comments, oh, there we go. Will there be any changes to the ABA requirements for employment statistics?
I don't think so. I mean, we have an advisory group with NALP, with career services directors who we talk to about employment reporting, and we're going to have a meeting again. But I think both NALP and us don't want to change the current 10-month reporting thing because it's important to see trends, and that's an important snapshot. I mean, we did briefly talk about whether we should have a later check as well, but I think, I mean, the additional work required to do that, particularly now when schools are cutting back, and I think some schools may cut back on the career services staff. I don't want to make them do 2 checks. Also, the farther out you go from the time that students graduate, the harder it is to keep track of graduates. And I think it increases the work for career services persons. So it's ultimately up to the council. And like I said, I'll talk to the NALP advisory group again, but my initial instinct is we probably won't change that because of the reasons I stated. But we're always open to continuing dialogue with the schools over these issues.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Those are the questions that I see. Again, I want to thank our amazing panel here of legal education leaders and assessment leaders. We really appreciate your time. I know this was incredibly interesting for me. I learned a lot, and so I thank you for taking the time to meet with us today, and welcome you to the virtual happy hour that's going to happen right after this. If you are in the mood for some drinks and some fellowship, so please join us. I'm going to stay on this line for just a minute. If the panelists need to go, they are welcome to do so. But otherwise, I was just going to do my closing remarks and give us a couple of minutes before we have our virtual happy hour.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all. It's kind of amazing to me that we are already done with the conference. I don't know where the day went. Every hour seemed so short as we moved through it, just because there was so much to talk about and there was such wonderful dialogue and feedback. I know I learned a lot throughout the day. I'm so incredibly thankful to all of our panelists who prepared and who shared their wisdom throughout the day. We have just amazing people working in the legal academy, and I appreciate their willingness to share. But I also very much appreciated the robust dialogue that our participants and attendees of the conference had. We very much appreciate you. If you have any feedback for us on how we might improve upon future events, there will be a survey available through the WOVA app, and we very much appreciate your feedback on today's conference so that we know how to improve in the future. And I thought, as I was attending various sessions throughout the day, there were a couple of themes that really stuck out to me that I heard on pretty much every panel. And the first was this idea that we are all coping with a lot of uncertainty right now. The one thing that is certain is uncertainty, right? The one thing we know is the unknown. And I think that's incredibly difficult, but in some ways I found today empowering to know that I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who doesn't have all the answers, who is not an expert in how to deal with a pandemic. And it was really heartening to me to hear that all of you are facing similar challenges and are thinking through how to best approach those challenges. But also along with that, again and again and again, I heard today about the importance of being transparent with that. I think it's okay. Nobody expects us to be experts in a pandemic. Most people who lived through the last pandemic in 1918 are no longer with us. And so that is an expertise that we simply don't have. And so I heard again and again and again that it's okay to simply be transparent and say, I don't have the answers, but I'm working hard on it. Thank you for bringing that issue forward, and we will address it. And I thought that was helpful in and of itself. Along those lines of transparency, I also heard again on multiple panels the importance of being transparent and how that's really important for a couple of reasons. So the first was that obviously it eases anxiety for people in our community who are dealing with numerous challenges, whether it's just the uncertainty of the pandemic and whether or not there's going to be online classes or in-person classes, to many people who may be struggling with job loss, financial repercussions, may be engaged in elder care or child care. These are all real challenges for our community. And so even though we don't know the answers, many of the panelists pointed out that just saying we're aware that this is an issue and we're trying to work through it can be very helpful to our community. And I thought that was good feedback. I also heard on numerous panels, and not just the two panels that were focused on student wellness and then faculty staff wellness, of the importance of wellness and trying to take some time for ourselves. The last 4 to 5 months have been hard. If you're anything like me, you're tired, you've experienced anxiety, you've experienced exhaustion, depression in the last couple of months. It is a truly difficult time. And to be frank, I think a lot of people believe that the next 4 to 5 to 6 months are going to be as challenging. And so it's really important that we find time for ourselves as people working in the legal profession and the legal academy to take care of ourselves and to find some time for your wellness, whatever that means for you. For me, that means a pint of Ben & Jerry's, but whatever makes you happy, I encourage you to engage in that, because many seem to agree on the panels throughout that that's going to be really important. It's also now another big takeaway from today's conference has been that there is a network of professionals out there who are available and willing to help each other. I just love the fact that we've had so many people engaging and talking about these issues, saying this is the issue I'm currently facing, and others saying, either, yes, I've thought about that and I don't have a solution, or here's the way that we've worked through that. Please use the WOVA app that you have as part of this conference to assist you in your networking. There's great opportunities to connect each other through that app and to get each other's email addresses. So I encourage you to continue this discussion. The app should be up for at least several days more, so you can take advantage of that opportunity. And there's even spaces within the various categories that we had in today's conference where you can talk to each other and continue the conversation that hopefully today's conference spurred, so that you can continue it well into the future. The other thing that I saw at a lot of the panels that we heard from today is certainly every school is dealing with some unique challenges, whether it be the politics of the state that they're in or the decisions that their main campus is making. But yet there's a lot of commonality in the challenges that we are facing, and we really can work together. These issues are things where we don't need to compete. And so I'm just very excited about the willingness to come together and move forward. I think another important message that we received today from the conference is the importance of contingency plan. I think our code word for the fall is going to have to be nimble. We simply do not know what the future holds. We don't even know what next week holds in some cases. I think last week was a good example where many of us who work in administration spent basically all of last week dealing with the ICE policy and the ramifications of that, only to find out that the administration was removing that policy. So it seems as if things are happening quickly and there's a new challenge every week. And so that means that if we're thinking of our A, B, and C, and D plan, that's probably not a bad idea, and thinking through contingencies for various experiences, as Dean Emeritus Rodriguez said at the beginning of the panel. And last, I just want to emphasize some advice that Kelly Testi gave in the last panel, which I thought was really good advice. She gave 4 points, which was don't be afraid to take some risks. That resilience and growth happens when you take another step forward. And that's certainly been our excuse. So, or not our excuse, but our experience at the University of Utah. So we've been talking about doing more online education, distance learning, more outreach via Zoom. And now, of course, we're doing it. And it's been working really well in most instances, especially as ways to communicate with people who might normally not be in the local community. And so I think there have been some benefits to being forced into this new model as we've learned new and exciting ways to grow. And so I thought her advice there was really helpful. She also said, put students first. And when she was saying that, she said that she had a note on her desk about, is this good for students? And I really thought that was a good mantra, because we're going to have some really hard decisions to make, especially in the next probably 6 weeks to 2 months as we get ready for the fall semester. And so I think her advice of really centering students is good advice, because oftentimes we're going to be pulled in many different directions. And at the end of the day, our students really are the heart of our institutions. And so I thought that was excellent advice that she gave. She also talked about doubling down on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I thought this too was really good feedback. We know that because of recent killings, the anti-racist protests, that these times on top of the pandemic have been particularly difficult for people of color and people with disabilities, people who identify as LGBTQ+. And so that's important to keep in mind as we're planning for the future, but also just the value and the wonderful nature that people from all different backgrounds and diversity bring to our institutions, that I thought that she's absolutely right, that this is really a good time to focus on that. And last but not least, I just want to affirm her advice to think virtual, but make it great. And I think it is natural for us. The law is a conservative profession by nature. We are traditionalists. We've been doing some things the same way for a very long time, but now is really, if there's a silver lining to it or excitement to it, it's a time of innovation where we're being forced to really look at ourselves in the mirror and think critically about whether the way we've always done it is truly the best way, and if this is the time that we should be innovating and looking at a different way. And so this time, although challenging, can be a great opportunity to move us forward in a new and exciting way. So those are just some of the themes that I heard throughout the panels that I had the honor and privilege of listening to today. Again, I want to thank you so much for participating in today's conference. And I just want to give one more thank you to our amazing team at the S.J. Quinney College of Law. Our events team, our IT team, and our communication team have just poured their heart and soul into this conference and put so much effort into making this conference a success. I would normally, if we were in person, say, you know, can we give them a big round of applause? But just please, in your heart of hearts, know that they've worked hard. And if you ever get a chance to meet them, give them your thanks. I'm certainly appreciative for everything they've done. So with that, we have approximately 6 minutes, 5 to 6 minutes before our virtual happy hour. I hope you will join myself and Dean Emeritus Dan Rodriguez for the virtual happy hour. There are some documents in the WOVA app, some drink recipes, both alcoholic and mocktails. So go make yourself a drink, look at the games that we have listed there, and come join us for a networking opportunity. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great